yet it can cause cloudy water, it could cause colored water, it can cause algae blooms, coral disease, fish death. It's like a silent, invisible killer, and it's called dissolved organic compounds, or better known as DOCs. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of CVtv Podcast. My name is Carlos. I'm your host, and today I'm here with Mike Paletta, one of our regular guests here. Mike, how are you?
Very good, Carlos. Always pleasure to talk to you and have people learn something new, hopefully.
I hope so. I think today's show is going to be amazing. Before we start the show, I want to say that usually we have Dave on the show, but this time around, technology sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work. And we were having a little bit of issues. Dave was having a little bit of technology, and we didn't want to delay the show. So we decided to go ahead and record it, you and I, Mike, because I think it's one of the better shows that we're going to do out there. It's kind of like a hidden danger, a hidden lurking thing that is out there that causes a lot of problems, yet we don't know about it because we can't see it. And it's called DOCs, or dissolved organic compounds. So, and for that, we have Mike here, who's been around the hobby for a long time. Mike, give us a little a little summary of who you are.
Let's see. I've been doing this. This is my 41st year of having reef tanks. I've written 2 books and 400 articles, and I write for a few magazines still. I give talks and a fair amount of podcasts. And I talk to a lot of hobbyists via Facebook. And I've made every mistake you can make. So I try to keep other people from making the same mistakes.
So let's talk about DOCs. First of all, what are DOCs? What are dissolved organic compounds?
Well, what's interesting in thinking of this topic, I had pretty much forgotten about them until Salem Clemens wrote about them. And then an aha moment came. In the early days of the hobby, we used to look at the yellowing in the water. It had a name, Gelvin or Gilvin or something. And for whatever reason, with LED lights and the super skimmers we have and all the ICP testing, we sort of went away from looking at DOCs as an important component of the tank. And what's interesting is, after reading Salem's article on the topic and looking at how it may totally invert what's going on in the tank and make some things that are good suddenly become pathogenic, an aha moment came, because I probably get 1 or 2 people a week contacting me saying, all my parameters are perfect, and they show me their parameters and they're all perfect, but I'm still losing corals. I'm still losing this. I'm still losing that. And I never thought to look at the DOC levels. And very few manufacturers were actually looking at the DOC levels as well. Well, since that article, a couple of the ICP test companies have come up with tests to look at the DOC levels, and we've come to find out that there is a range of DOC. As I was joking with Carlos earlier, DOCs are like oxygen. Enough will get you high, too much will get you high, not enough and you're going to die. It's the same way with corals. There's a what we call a therapeutic window, where if the DOC levels are in that range, the corals do fine. Above that, you have problems, and below that, you have problems. And the question is, and we're still determining it based on these tests, is what exactly are the optimal levels? So from the work I've done on this for the last 6 months or so, and reading the literature, and I mean, fortunately, places like Fauna Marin have a fair amount of information on it, and talking with Claude has provided even more information. It seems to be the levels somewhere between 2 and 4 seem to be optimal. 5 to 9, you're borderline, and above 9, and I've had as high as 11 become very problematic in the tank. And as Salem pointed out, when you get to those extremely high levels, above 9, you may have bacteria that were beneficial suddenly become pathogenic. We haven't documented that yet to the degree we would like, but that's one of the things he's now looking at, is what happens, because one of the things that I have found, which I find amazingly interesting, because I one thing I suggest to everyone, keep records of what you're doing, keep a log of what your parameters are and what you've done and what you've changed. And looking at my log, I found that whenever I was starting to get RTN, STN issues in the tank, I had not only high phosphate levels above 0.2, but I've also had high DOC levels. There was a high amount of yellowing in the water. It was as high as 11. When I pulled the DOC levels and the phosphate levels down, the RTN, STN stopped. If it was halfway up a coral, suddenly it stopped on those corals. Now, in the past, I had treated those with antibiotics like Cipro or other things, and it stopped it that way. So it shows that there's a bacterial factor to having high DOCs. We just don't know about it yet. We just haven't, there's still a lot to learn.
So where do DOCs come from?
Kills are basically anything that decomposes: excess food, fish waste, detritus accumulation, algae blooms and then a die-off, or the die-off of virtually anything. Even the die-off of the coral skeletons. If you're losing corals, you're getting more DOCs in the water, the effect's going to snowball. So the key is to look at what may potentially be causing the DOCs. Look at the yellowing in the water.
Will DOCs affect oxygen in the water?
Potentially, anything that's decomposing is going to extract oxygen from the water. That's why one of the things that a couple of us have been looking at is we've added dissolved oxygen probes to test and see what the dissolved oxygen levels are in the tank. Now, if you have a stagnant pool with not a lot of movement at the top, your oxygen level may be 4 or 6, which is not good. You want to have it above 6 to 8 is even better. And so if you have good water movement and have good oxygen level in the room, you get that. The other problem you're going to have if you have high CO2 levels in the room, you're also not going to get quite as much of a high oxygen level in the tank.
So for a hobbyist, the easiest way to know if you have DOCs is almost like the old bucket test.
Well, there's an even older test, and that is you would hold a white card in the tank and you would look at it horizontally. And if the card looked yellow as it looked, that would tell you, okay, I have a high amount of DOC in the tank. It's time to do a water change. It's time to be more aggressive with carbon, things like that. Now there's other means for managing it with carbon, but I do my own DOC tests every time I do a water change, which I do weekly. I fill up a 6-gallon bucket with clean water from the tank. I set it next to a bucket with freshly prepared seawater, and I take a picture. And I compare that picture with pictures I had taken when the DOC level was 2 or 3, when the DOC levels were 5, when the DOC levels were 7 or 9, or where the DOC levels are 11 or above. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of eyeballing to see the difference between an 11 and a 2. If you can't tell the difference, then send it in and have them do the test. But you can see there's a significant difference between them. I mean, I always do them in the same light. I always have them in the same spot. So those things don't change. And if you really want to be really precise, do it in sunlight. Sunlight doesn't change for the most part. Your lights, your shadows, and everything else, what time of day you could potentially do it. I have done them in sunlight, and it's even more dramatic, the difference between the buckets.
Okay. But what about like sending water sample to like ICP? Would ICP work on that, Mike, or is it a different test that the lab has to run?
That's included in some of the ICP tests. I do an ICP test now once a month. At the end of every month, I send in an ICP test, so I have a constant flow of what it is. It takes 10 days to come back. I've always done a water change in between of when I've sent it in. But since I do the same water change every week, pretty much things are pretty stable, so it shouldn't change dramatically from when I did the water test to when I do the ICP test. But again, it does give a different ICP test, give different measures of it. Fauna Marin has 3 different ways of looking at the DOC level. Each one provides sort of a different perspective of what the dissolved organics are. And if you want to read about dissolved organics and what they mean, go on to Fauna Marin site and look it up. There's a lot of information that Claude has provided.
We have the SAK 254, which is all this test is that you purchase the ICP test from Fauna Marine and then you submit it, right? And then when you submit it, it actually allows you to buy the extra add-ons, which are those extra tests that you can purchase right then and there. If you don't want them, then you just send your ICP test, which you're already prepaid for. But so the SAK 254, technically what you're doing is you're measuring the amount of yellowing or the amount of color in the water. So it's instead of having, our human eye look at the buckets, you actually have an optical sensor tell you how much yellowing in the water is. Then they have the NPOC, which is kind of like it measures the dissolved organic carbon in the water.
Yeah, it's kind of the inert carbon in the water, but it still has some effect. That's the one area where we still need to do a lot more study on as to exactly what that means. The SAK test is good because it's comparable to looking at the dissolved organic level with some other tests. The NPOC test is kind of a little bit more esoteric. I mean, if you want to know everything, I run one of those a year just in case to make sure it's not off the scale. And the nice thing about Fauna Marin is they have a continuum and they have red and green and they show you where you are in the continuum. It's not like a red light and a green light. It's the total continuum. And what's also is interesting, it also shows you a lot of different ratios between things because it's not just every chemical and every element is not just a single entity that doesn't interact with everything. They all interact with each other. And you could have 4 things that are good and one thing's off the scale. And because that one thing is off the scale, the ratios between it and everything else are off. And that's what can throw off your tank.
So, I mean, we talk about that all the time with the ICP testing. And a great example is calcium. You can have perfect calcium level, but if your magnesium is too low, then you can't process that calcium.
And if your potassium's too high, the potassium becomes toxic. If your potassium level is higher than calcium, it's toxic to the tank. So
we talk about fluoride too, and vanadium too.
Well, that's the one thing that Claude taught me was how important fluoride was. I mean, my corals were doing okay, but they weren't doing great and I didn't realize my fluoride level was 0.31 instead of 1.3. So it took me 3 months to bring it up. And once it did, it's like the corals, it's like after this drought we've had here, it's like suddenly giving your grass a lot of rain. All of a sudden they just took off.
Yeah. So there's one more test that Fauna Marine had, and it's called the TNB test. And for what I understand is like nitrogen that is in the system bound to something that eventually will come off and feed the algae and bacteria or something. It's the potential bad. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, one of the tests I've done, I'm not experimenting on my tank like I used to by changing all the parameters. Instead of what I'm doing is testing things within the tank. So one of the things I did is I took out all the detritus I could. I let it sit for 3 weeks without taking out the detritus, and I took out all the detritus, and then I let it settle. And what was interesting is I thought that the detritus was sitting in a 4-gallon or 4-cup measure. I thought it would go black. I thought it would go anaerobic. I thought it would. No, it stayed perfectly clean. And it totally blew my mind because where I've accumulated detritus in the tank, I've always had cyano, but in a separate system, it didn't do that. But then I tested it for nitrogen and for nitrate and phosphate. The phosphate in this, there was literally roughly half a pound of dry detritus that was in the tank. The phosphate level was off the scale. The water level in the tank was 0.03. Think about that. The water level of phosphate in the tank was 0.03, but in this bound phosphate in the detritus, it was off the scale. So the detritus was sitting there and constantly feeding the tank a low amount of phosphate that I couldn't measure. The same thing with nitrate. The nitrate level that came off this was around 50. The nitrate in the tank was around 10.
Wow.
That's what you're measuring.
It's like a ticking bomb.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't clean their sumps out. I clean my sump out when I'm doing the water change. A lot of people have organisms that are consuming that. I mean, if you have a lot of worms, a lot of detrivores, a lot of other things, they're consuming this and keeping it constant motion and constantly breaking it down, building it back up, and you're not getting this thing. But when you have it setting as sort of a little cesspool, it accumulates, and that's where the problems come in. So that depends on what your microfauna population is. Something else we haven't looked at and that we need to understand more. I mean, I constantly get advertisements for pod your reef. And when I ask people, okay, you've potted your reef, what did you see? Basically, most people don't see anything dramatic, which is probably good. But they also don't see anything real. I mean, the first thing I always go by, they don't see anything deleterious to doing it, which is what you want when you're adding something to the tank. I said, well, what do you see? Do you see less detritus? And that's usually the thing they say. Or the algae levels on the rocks has sort of gone away. So the detrivores that the copepods and amphipods are eating have probably helped in consuming this stuff. But it's not like you add an urchin and overnight the rock's clean. It's more little nibbling until the population gets large enough.
Got it. So here's my question, and I think a lot of hobbies are asking is like, so should I vacuum my gravel, my sand to get that? Because when I do it, sometimes it's like black coming out of there.
If it's black coming out of there, then you probably should be. I've also had it where it was clean, where I had sand sifting snails and cowries and other organisms constantly tearing it up, and it stayed perfectly white. They were consuming the detritus and everything else that was in there. And what's interesting, when I had a lot of organisms in the sand, I really didn't get a whole lot of yellowing in the water.
Wow. So those annoying little gobies that do this.
No, not the gobies. The gobies just drop the sand on everything and kill it. No, you want things that stay in the sand and don't bother it. I mean, the only bad thing I have seen is I have had bristleworms, the thickness of my thumb and this long, and as long as there was food in there, they were fine. But then I would find them coming out at night, and they would literally go into the oral cavities of LPS corals to take any food that they had. They were killing the LPS corals doing that. So I had to extract all of those. I've also had them eat soft corals. So there's pluses and minuses to having big bristleworms. That's why I go with sand sifting stars and cowries.
Hey, Mike, so you mentioned something about catalytic carbon, and the hobbyist in me, all I hear is carbon, which is, I hear it's like, oh, I'm just going to go buy carbon at the local fish store and be done with it. But I know it's a different type of carbon.
It's a much more highly processed activated carbon. You can use carbon, but you would have to use a extraordinary amount of regular bituminous coal or coconut carbon to get the same effect. And those carbons typically also take out more trace elements than does CAC. And CAC, Andre at Reef Moonshiners has actually done research on seeing which carbons and which other methods were the best at removing DOC. And what he found is that the activated carbons significantly removed a lot more DOC than did any of the other carbons or any other media. I mean, there's a lot of different resins and other things out there. None of those are as effective at removing DOC as is catalytic carbon. I do not have any catalytic carbon to sell you. I wish I did, because I could make a lot of money selling catalytic carbon. I mean, I buy it twice a year. It works extraordinarily well. You'd have to run it passively because it is so aggressive. For a big tank like mine, it is somewhat expensive, but to me, it's more than worth it. Because to me, the most expensive coral you buy is the one you have to replace. So if I'm not getting RT and ST into my tank and my parameters are good, I don't have any problem spending the money on catalytic carbon.
Right.
You know, catalytic carbon will cost you basically what a really nice frag will cost you. That's how you think it's effective.
Yeah. It's I know that I was reading up on the guys over at Moonshiners, and they said that it was for the formula was like 300 grams of catalytic carbon per 100 gallons of water. I'm not sure how they came up with it. I mean, they, like you said, Andrew has done a lot of testing in there, and everything is a rough estimate. It's just a starting point.
Yeah, it gives us a baseline from which to work. I mean, if you have exceedingly high DOC, you probably need more. If you have constantly low DOC, it all depends on what your fish load is, how often you're feeding, you know, how much algae you have in the tank. There's a zillion different factors. I mean, every single tank is different. If I gave you the exact same live rock corals and equipment that I had, our tanks
still be different.
Nothing alike. And people tend to lump everything in. Well, I have this kind of tank. It's 120 gallon. It's all SPS with frags. It doesn't matter. It's different than everybody else's tank. So things like using CAC, like using any other compound, or, you know, I run a wet skimmer or a dry skimmer, all those matter. All those have an effect. I always we're just doing little intricate things now to make a difference. There's very few things you're going to do to your tank that are going to be, wow, this is amazing. It made a huge change. It's all going to be incrementalism. You make things incrementally a little bit better. But with DOC, if it gets out of hand, it could be significantly bad. That's more than doing something small. You make a big change when you keep your DOC levels in the 2 to 3 range.
So I have read that when you're using the catalytic carbon, the CAC, that some people have claimed that it can affect corals and it can almost kill your fish.
I've
You
actually
go
had
over that?
people contact me that after using it the first time, where they basically just poured it in a bag, sealed the bag, and threw the bag in, basically put it in their overflows. The dust and other material coming out of the material irritated some of their corals and irritated some of their fish. They actually lost a couple fish. The same thing will happen if you run lanthanum chloride and don't let the leaves precipitate out of it. The fine dust gets in the gills of the bigger fish and they die. I've had that happen a couple of times by sheer stupidity, by trying to go too fast. So as with everything, you go slow. So what I do now is I boil water in the microwave, RODI water. When I mix up a new bag of CAC, I pour the boiling water across the carbon. It takes out all the dust. You can hear it effervescent when you do that. Seal the bag, put the bag where it can be passively. You don't want to run this in a carbon reactor per se. You put this in an overflow. You put this where there's a fair amount of flow going across it. It will take it out gradually. You're not going to see your DOCs go from 11 to 2 overnight. You're going to see them go from 11 to 10 in a couple of days, and from 10 to 8 in 3 or 4 more days. It's going to take a week to 2 weeks to get the levels down significantly. And you don't want it to go much faster than that, because as with everything in this hobby, your corals got used to a certain level of things. If you change it dramatically, it's just as bad as them being bad. So you don't want to do that with this stuff.
Quick question with the DOs, with the CAC, the catalytic carbon. Does it become supersaturated at some point? Do you have to change it? How often do you think?
I change every 2 weeks. I change a quarter of what I'm running. I run 8 bags of it in small amounts so that I can take 2 bags out, put 2 more bags in. Those bags have about 200 grams each in them. So that's what I do. And that's been working for me for the past 3 months, keeping my DOC levels in the 2 to 3 range. Now, granted, I have a lot of fish and I have a lot of corals in the 600 gallon system. I mean, a lot and big biomass. I mean, I have a Dulcimer tank that is literally this big, and it produces a ton of waste.
Okay, so recapping on the DOCs, because we talked about skimmers, we talked about the catalytic carbon. We've talked about water changes. We talked about ozone as well and refusions. But it seems to me that not one single thing is going to do the job for you. It's almost like anything in the hobby. It's a combination of multiple things. And for what I feel, it's like skimmer, catalytic carbon, and water changes are going to be your best bet.
Yeah, I mean, I've played with a few things over the past couple of years. One of the things that I did, I upgraded my skimmer and got a much better, more effective skimmer, and I've also started running it wetter, and I have found that has had a significant impact in improving the water quality. I also run a small amount of ozone, and it just keeps the water crystal clear for the most part. I also switched over from using sodium carbonate to Claude's bolus system using sodium bicarbonate. That significantly reduced the amount of detritus in the tank. And whether the detritus is fish waste or something carbon-based or calcium-based, things were probably settling on it. Since I have less detritus, I also see less DOC occurring in the tank, which is an added benefit. I still primarily have to keep the phosphate levels down because I feed a fairly high-protein diet to the fish. So in that regard, I still have to play with keeping the phosphate levels down. But as I said, if you have high phosphate, now I've seen a couple of tanks, particularly Sanjay's tank, in one area when it was in its prime, was running a phosphate level of 0.5. He was also running a nitrate level over 90, but he was running 1,000 par on the tank. So he could run high nutrients with high lighting. People tend to neglect that. High lighting, you need higher nutrients. Lesser lighting, lower nutrients. It is a fairly simple rule, and people disagree with it, but I've seen it enough to know it does have an impact. So in that regard, if you're running high, but he didn't have any algae in the tank, and he didn't have any RTN, STN for the most part because his DOC levels were down. I mean, his water was pretty clear, but we didn't even look or test for DOCs. From time to time, he, like I, would have little random bouts of STN in the tank, and we could never figure out why. Now, from what I'm seeing, I'm guessing his DOC levels got too high. And I remember, this is anecdotal, But if you're running your tank and all your parameters are spot on and you can't figure out why occasionally you're getting RTN, STN, look at your DOC levels. Because I haven't run it where your DOC levels are over 11 and your phosphate levels 0.1 or around there. That may be enough to trigger it. I don't know exactly what the full ratio is to phosphate to DOC of when you have a deleterious effect occur, but it may be when your DOCs are higher, you need even less of a phosphate level. So these are all things we need to work on.
It's funny how it works, because us, everybody, and we've been doing this for so long, but if everything is spot on and things are still going wrong, what's the first thing that you're going to tell somebody? It's like, do a water change.
Water change.
Yep, do a water change, which by definition will bring the DOCs down.
Right. But now there's a whole school of thought, well, we don't need to ever do water changes. I don't do water changes to add things. I do water changes to take things out of the tank. I mean, one of the things that I've built, I run a 25-foot line so I can just drain my tank into the drain. I don't have to schlep buckets anymore. I'm too able to be schlecking buckets from room to room. But one of the things I built was I took a hard plastic tubing and I built a S line on the end. I filled it with sand, I heated it with a heat gun, and I bent it so I can put the tube under rocks to get all the detritus that's accumulated under the live rock. And that has made a significant difference in how much detritus accumulates in the tank.
Right. So a combination of everything. So signs of trouble: yellowing in the water, algae, despite nutrients being down, coral disease, fish disease. You do an ICP testing, everything seems all right, but nothing is working. So that's usually, one thing we need to do is check DOCs.
The other thing I learned, and I never realized this, I never thought about it. If you learn nothing else from this podcast today, when you get your ICP test back and you go, oh, I got to fix these trace zones, before you do that, start at the bottom of the pyramid and work your way up. Look at if your water's pure that's going in. Look at your salinity level. Look at your alkalinity level. Look at your pH. Look at your temperature. Look at your major trace elements. Then go to your minor trace elements. Because if any of these other factors are out of whack, it doesn't matter what you do with your trace elements. They can all be perfect. But if your salinity is wrong, which I see happen a lot, because people are still using the little crappy boxes or a refractometer that needs to be adjusted all the time, or keep this in mind. Always start from the bottom of the pyramid and work your way up. After doing ICP tests literally for the last 10 years, I never thought of this. And then Claude told me, look, why aren't you working at the bottom up? Why are you worried about this? Because you have this down here.
Well, if you fix the bottom, it will fix the top automatically. It's kind of almost that way. I had a friend of mine that I went to his house yesterday, and the first thing that he asked me is like, before I left the house, it's like, hey man, can you bring your floating hydrometer? And I go, yeah, the one that should be at the Smithsonian, that everybody wants it because it actually works. Yeah, it's old technology, but it works better than anything else out there.
Yeah, I have 2 glass hydrometers. Those are all I use. I'm too old to see how fine the lines are, but thank God for digital cameras. I take a picture,
zoom in,
and then I float it around. I go, okay, we're right on. Because it does float around, but I use modern technology with something that's been around for 40, 50, 60 years or longer.
Yeah, but the floating hydrometer is the best thing you can get.
It's the best thing, and it's cheap. It's like $9. I mean, the only thing that drives me nuts is I always break the neck. So
yes,
that's why I have 2 of them. So if I break the neck, I can order another one, have it shipped overnight. I always can check, and I do test my salinity weekly now. I used to go every 6 months. Everything's fine. No. I had a slow leak in the tank, and if I hadn't tested the salinity, I would have never known there was a leak in the tank, because the salinity kept dropping and dropping, and I couldn't figure out why. It's because fresh water is being pumped in and salt water was dripping out.
Yeah. So recapping again, best practices: skimming, carbon, water changes, that's what we say. I know we talked about ozone, and I know people, I know how I am. And all I hear is, ozone will work. And that's way easier than doing anything else. The problem with ozone, Mike, tell me.
Ozone, if you run too high a level, it can be caustic to not only you, because it's bad for your lungs. It also is caustic for some fish. You have to make sure it's taken out of the water before it gets in the water. You have to run ozonated water under carbon. If you have your bromine levels up, it can cause hydrobromates, or that may not be the right term, but those are toxic to some organisms. So ozone is a tool. It's not something, and it's going to change things incrementally. You don't want to run. I have been to zoos, literally, where you could smell the ozone when you walked into the building, and after 10 years, the concrete was starting to dissolve from how much ozone they had in the system.
Not only that, is that ozone also like amino acids, trace elements, and everything and all that. So the very
breaks down anything organic.
It breaks down anything. So the one thing you can end up with a tank where you're starving your tank because there's nothing there.
Yeah. You don't want to have COC levels under 3 for the most part. 2 to 3, 2 to 4 seems to be good. I even know now of people that are adding chlorine bleach to their tank as basically the same thing as a form of ozone. I have not experimented with that, but that is something that people are doing rather than doing CAC or anything, because obviously chlorine bleach is a lot cheaper than CAC. I don't know enough about it. It may work, it may help, but like I said, I have quit doing those kind of experiments on my tank. It got to be too expensive to do stuff for stupid reasons.
Yes. So, okay. So again, DOCs, kind of like the hidden danger out there. Not to freak everybody out, but keep an eye on them. I think everybody, just like you said at the beginning of the show, it's like we used to care about them all the time back in the day when we're using metal halides, and then we got to the point where we didn't care, and then we forgot about them until about 6-9 months ago, and they are kind of like that eureka. It's like, oh, now this explains a lot.
I remember this. But that's what's curious is about the more things change in the hobby, the more they come back. I mean, we were doing all these different ways to introduce alkalinity to our tank. Now we've gone back to the bolus system, which is what we did. Some people have gone back to using calc-VOSA to bring their pH levels up and take the phosphate levels out of the water. Now we're looking at DOCs. I've done a lot more aggressive mechanical filtration on my tank. For years, I basically forgot about it. Now I try to take everything out to try to get the detritus out as easily as I can. We've gone from doing water changes to we don't need ever to do water changes to a lot of us have gone back to doing water changes more aggressively. I mean, everything eventually comes back to how it was.
It's like the 80s coming back, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just my hair won't come back, huh?
No, well, actually, there's a couple new drugs potentially that could grow hair.
Oh, well, that's
if I would grow hair after all this time, it would scare people.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mike. It's always great to have you. It's always a lot of information. I hope this is not the last time we'll have you again.
Yep.
If you like the show, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, please just hit the bell, subscribe. We're on podcast available through Spotify. And then if you want to find us, you can also find us on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful mugs in here. But I know we usually have Dave on this show right now, but we were having a little bit of technical difficulties, so we decided to do it, the two of us. So thank you again for everybody. Thank you for watching. Mike, thank you for coming, and we will see you all next time.
As always, thanks. And I look forward to hearing your questions about this, because this is a hot topic that we're going to do a lot more study on.
Yes.